Number 1.
Amy Marie Achimek, age 13, vanished from Phoenix, Arizona on November 6, 1981. Amy was last seen getting ready for bed at 10 p.m. at her family's apartment. They lived near 35th and Van Buren. The building has since been torn down and is now a parking lot. According to Amy's sister, a neighbor, Raymond Diaz, and his girlfriend had befriended Amy, although there are indications that she may have been apprehensive about them. They reportedly picked Amy up that night to take her to a party. She woke her sister up to invite her along, but her sister declined. Later that night, Diaz and his girlfriend appeared at the Achimek's door, asking her family what was wrong. He was naked until his girlfriend went next door to get a blanket to wrap around him. At this point, Amy had not been reported missing, and her family hadn't given any indication that anything was wrong. Amy had reportedly left with these same neighbors once before, and her sister believes the only reason Amy wasn't harmed the first time is that they were pulled over by police. According to Diaz's cousin, Amy was at his home on the night of her disappearance, accompanied by Diaz and his girlfriend. Diaz had apparently commented that he wanted to have sex with Amy, and his cousin would not allow it in his home. The three left, and Amy was never seen again. Amy's family believes that Diaz had already raped and killed Amy by the time he appeared naked at their apartment door, and that they went back to bury her afterwards. Diaz is currently incarcerated on charges of kidnapping from a 1983 incident, and his then-girlfriend now suffers from severe mental illness. Neither have been charged in Amy's disappearance, although a hair consistent with Amy's was found in a car that Diaz had borrowed that night. If the statement is true that Amy was seen at a party but left with Diaz and his girlfriend, it seems unlikely that anyone else witnessed what happened to her. I haven't seen any details on the girlfriend's mental illness, but it's possible that she could provide information as to where Amy is. I also wonder if Diaz was questioned and whether he admitted to being with Amy that night. Being that the hair was found in a car, which was consistent with Amy's, it shouldn't be too hard to test to verify that it is indeed Amy's hair. I don't know all the details of what has been looked into, but it seems like the obvious next steps would be to test the hair and to try to get information from the girlfriend. I hope the police are doing everything possible to bring Amy home. In October 2018, Raymond Diaz was arrested on one count of first-degree murder in Amy's case. It's worth noting that although media reports that he was arrested, he was actually incarcerated at the time for sex crimes unrelated to Amy's disappearance. It was stated that DNA testing led to his arrest. Unfortunately, there have been no updates since, so the status of the case 6 months after his arrest is unknown.
Number 2.
Michael Duane Burnett, age 14, disappeared from Oroville, California on March 17, 1971. He left his home on Claremont Drive on the morning of his disappearance to walk to Central Middle School, but he never arrived. The school was just over a mile away from his home. He'd reportedly had a disagreement with his mother prior to leaving the house, so she initially considered that he might have run away, possibly to his father's home in Washington. His father had not heard from him though. Police learned that Mike had been assaulted by some boys from another school a few days prior to his disappearance. This resulted in injury severe enough that he was sent home from school. It's unknown whether these boys might have had anything to do with his disappearance. I haven't been able to find any indication of whether they targeted Michael specifically or if it was a random attack. It sounds as though it occurred on the grounds of his school or possibly on his way to school, since there are references to him being sent home. There are also 3 friends or classmates of Michael's who police believe may have some information about his disappearance. Their names are Carl Laney, Ricky Brown, and Mitch Brown. It is not known if Ricky and Mitch are related, and thus far law enforcement has been unable to locate any of the 3. This plea was published in 2007. It seems there was a brief interest on the part of the media that year, as there were a few articles that year. I've seen nothing before or after. I did attempt to contact the detective to verify whether these 3 men are still being sought, but got no response. It's worth noting that Michael was 5'93" and 160 pounds at the time of his disappearance, which suggests he would not have been an easy target for a stranger abduction. Michael is not believed to have left of his own accord, but it's unclear what happened to him. If you know the whereabouts of Carl Laney, Ricky Brown or Mitch Brown, who were in Oroville at the time, please contact Detective Dan Angel at Butte County Sheriff's Office. These men are not suspects, just people police believe may recall details that could be helpful. His parents are both deceased, but he has 4 sisters who continue to seek answers.
Number 3.
Valerie Lorraine Cuccia, age 20, vanished on May 4, 1974 from Brooklyn, New York. Valerie and a female friend became separated while at a nightclub, known then as Banana Fish. It later became the Mustard Seed, and the building now houses a grocery store. It was at 9604 3rd Avenue, near 96th, in the Bay Ridge neighborhood of Brooklyn. Valerie's friend said she last saw Valerie get into a blue metallic painted car with 2 men who were hard-looking. The car had Massachusetts plates. A couple reports suggest she was seen as she was being forced in the car, but there don't seem to be any actions on the part of witnesses to suggest that anyone was concerned. Valerie had been seen talking to these men in the club earlier that evening. Just before arriving at the club, Valerie and her friend, who both lived in the Canarsie neighborhood of Brooklyn, had met up at a school and hitchhiked together to the club. Valerie's two brothers, one a retired New York State police officer, still seek answers as to what happened to their sister. She lived in the Canarsie neighborhood of Brooklyn, was a college student and accomplished musician. Valerie had sold one of her musical compositions to the American Society of Composers, Authors and Publishers at age 16. By the time of her disappearance, two of her tunes were used on an album by a group called January Time. This song, Rainy Day Feeling, features her music and she is credited on the album. Valerie's parents dealt with hoaxes and false leads over the years. People attempted to extort money in exchange for their daughter's return from a cult, other false tips sent them to Florida. Both of Valerie's parents are now deceased, leaving her two brothers hoping to locate her remains. Note: although news articles report that the location of Banana Fish later became Mustard Seed, it's possible the locations were actually next door to each other. A message board poster who says they frequented the area claims that the two were not in the same exact spot. The poster states that Banana Fish nightclub, where Valerie was last seen, was situated in the rear half of the building, which had a restaurant in the front. The poster described the club as rowdy.
Number 4.
Max Edward Metcalf, age 32, vanished from Princeton, Wisconsin on October 7, 1958. Max was last seen by his wife, Katie, and their 5 children when he left in his pickup truck to go have a few beers at a tavern a half-mile away. I've been unable to find any information on whether or not he was seen there. Max never returned, and his truck was found between 11 p.m. and midnight that night, about 35 miles away in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, near Lake Winnebago. The truck was initially spotted by Oshkosh police, parked behind a storage facility on South Main Street. No action was taken immediately, as the officer had no reason to find the truck suspicious. They traced the truck to Max after learning that he was missing, about a week later. It's been noted that the parking brake was set, which his wife found odd. She reported that the parking brake was broken and that Max never used it. Some articles state that the truck was found a week later, as opposed to the same night he vanished. Additionally, there was a potential sighting of Max on Friday, October 10. A milk delivery man who knew Max stated that he had seen Max on the highway but had not spoken to him. I don't know if he was claiming to have seen Max in his truck or on foot. Shortly after his disappearance, an individual pointed out a spot on the northwestern corner of the Metcalf farm where the ground appeared to be disturbed. The ground was frozen at the time, and police announced their intention to dig it up when possible, but I've found no indication of whether this was ever done. Although no one has ever been named a suspect in his disappearance, it's worth noting that a former employee of Max's, Clarence Johnson, was charged with theft the following year. He was accused of stealing equipment from the Metcalf farm. Max had served in the Air Force during the Korean War. He was born in Packwaukee, Wisconsin to Walter and Jessie Metcalf and had several siblings. He grew up on his parents' farm and had his own farm at the time of his disappearance. He'd be 92 if still alive. Other than his children, who, based on Max's age, would likely have been very young at the time, there are few people left who remember Max and can share his story. I don't want Max's story to be lost. He was here, and although he's likely deceased, he is still somewhere, waiting to be found.
Number 5.
Don J. Ashley, age 18, was last seen in Wilmington, Delaware on December 14, 1971. Jay was last seen by his mother in the early morning hours at their residence at 427 E 35th Street as he left for school. He was carrying $45 that his grandmother had given him to buy Christmas presents. He never returned home. A check of attendance records confirmed that Jay did attend school that day, and it was learned that he walked his girlfriend, Valerie, home to the east side of Wilmington after school. Friends claimed to have seen him between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. that night at the King Street YMCA, which held coffee shop socials for teens on Tuesday and Thursday nights. He reportedly left the YMCA with several members of the Stallions, a youth group, sometimes referred to as a gang, that Jay was a member of. The group walked to a pool room on Curlett Street, between Spruce and Church Streets. After a while, the boys left, walking to the northern part of town where they lived. They eventually split up as each went in a different direction, headed to their homes. Jay was last seen by classmate and fellow Stallion member Calvin Berry at 22nd and Locust Streets, about 12 blocks from the Ashley home. On the same night, a 17-year-old boy, Leroy Ricky Morgan, also vanished, while presumably walking home in the same general area as Jay. Although Jay and Ricky were friends and both were members of the Stallions, it is not believed that they were together on the night in question. Ricky was also confirmed to have attended school that day. It is not known what he was doing in the afternoon immediately after school, but his mother stated that Ricky and his girlfriend were at the Morgan home in the evening, and he vanished after walking his girlfriend home to 26th and Tetnall Streets at 10:45 p.m. His girlfriend was the last person to see him alive. Jay's mother did not immediately panic, but contacted police in early January when Jay did not show up at his father's funeral. Police assumed he and Ricky had left together of their own volition and did little to search for them. Their theory was bolstered when a witness came forward, claiming to have seen both boys on January 3. The witness, who claimed to be a friend of Ricky, stated that he saw them walking near 11th and Kirkwood Streets. He said that when he stopped and called out to Ricky, both of them took off running in the opposite direction. Ricky's mother claims to have received a phone call in which she heard what she describes as a breathless voice utter "Mom. Ricky." Then she said she hears sounds consistent with someone wrestling the phone out of his hand and slamming down the receiver. Calvin Berry, who is said to have been the last to see Jay, at one point stated that he'd seen Jay being pulled into a car on the day of his disappearance, though he later denied this. The remains of Leroy Ricky Morgan were discovered in February 1972. The cause of death was ruled a drowning, though it hasn't been specified as accidental or intentional. Both families described their sons as typical teenage boys, saying that neither was a model student, but that they had never been in any serious trouble, nor had they ever stayed out without permission before. John J. Ashley remains missing, and it is not known whether his disappearance is connected to the death of Leroy Ricky Morgan.